In about 90 minutes, Canadian parliamentarians are set to hold an emergency debate on the escalating conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. I spoke to Israel's ambassador to Canada, Iddo Moed, right after the Iranian attack ended this afternoon. Have a listen. Hi, Ambassador. Thank you very much for making time to come back and to talk about this. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Vassy.
I wanted to start off and ask you about the details of the attack and what you are able to share with Canadians who are watching tonight. First off, how many missiles? Is there? What information do you have about the final tally, I guess you could say? And were the majority of them ballistic?
So they were all ballistic missiles, and 181 of them were shot into Israel in two waves. Fortunately, they may have created some damage, but no casualties. There are several people injured. We know of one casualty on the Palestinian side in Jericho, who was probably killed by some fallout from an interceptor missile. But overall, the damage is very, very limited, fortunately.
So there are just some injuries, but no casualties at this point?
No casualties. But, I mean, we have to think about something else, the psychology of this whole event. I mean, the whole country was in shelters, terrorized. 10 million people were actually anticipating an incoming barrage of missiles from Iran. And this is, of course, something unacceptable, intolerable. That sort of terror that Iran unleashes on Israel is something that we've seen in the past. This is the second time that is happening. And it's a warning signal, not just for Israel. We just have to remember that their ballistic missiles have reached far into Europe. So it's a real international threat. What we've seen tonight is just a forebear of perhaps something else.
And I certainly do want to ask you about what Israel's response will be. I just want to make sure I get all the information about the actual attack as well. Is it that the Iron Dome was able to intercept all 181?
So our defense systems, there are several layers of them. We intercept those that we see are going to hit populated areas. The rest, they are ignored so that we save our munition for the missiles for when it's necessary. So fortunately, maybe one or two got through and may have hit some residential areas. But again, no casualties, so that's very fortunate.
And were they aimed primarily at the most populated areas?
Yes. Deliberately, the biggest concentration of population in Israel, but it went all the way from the Negev in the south, covered the whole center of Israel to the north, and it's indiscriminate. They are not precise missiles. They just launched 181 missiles into the center of Israel, putting 10 million people in jeopardy, in danger. It's just incredible. It's unfathomable. But the moment we understood that this was incoming, of course, everybody got instructions from the home front command to take shelter. Israelis are very well trained. Unfortunately, we have safe rooms in each house that are well protected. And so everybody was taking shelter, and fortunately, no one really got seriously injured.
I wanted to ask you about that moment, because you referenced the last time Iran launched an attack back in April. That one was conveyed publicly through various channels, at least the prospect of it happening days in advance. This one came, at least publicly, from sources in the White House through U.S. media. That's when we first learned about it, just hours before it was launched. Did Israel have any advanced knowledge of, beyond that, or was that intelligence conveyed to Israel from the U.S.?
I can't tell you much about the operational exchanges that we're having with the United States. But what's important to note is that the Israeli public got a warning in time to take shelter, to prepare for this incoming attack. And so that's why we were able to put up, of course, our defense system, put them in place. They have been in place for quite a while since, of course, this war started, and we knew that Iran may get involved. But we have to remember, it's not just missiles coming in from Iran. Houthis have shot ballistic missiles into Israel from Yemen. The Iraqi militias have been launching UAVs from Iraq. Syria, we've seen missiles coming from Syria. Of course, Lebanon, Hezbollah. From Gaza, we have to remember that Gaza, still there are Hamas terrorists there as well, and the West Bank. So we have actually 7 fronts surrounding Israel from which Iran and its proxies are launching this war. And I think that today, this evening, when Parliament is going to discuss the situation in Lebanon, I have to remember, keep in mind that Iran has very long tentacles, not just in the region and beyond its immediate region, but actually internationally, even here in Canada. I think that CSIS came recently with a report about their involvement in campus encampments. The Director of National Intelligence in the U.S. Pointed to the same. So Iran is a threat to international security. We must remember that.
Do you believe that the federal government is taking that threat in this country as seriously as it should? And have you had any conversations, for example, with Minister Joly about this latest attack?
We've had discussions on a range of issues. We've discussed Iran, of course, also many, many times. We have to remember that Canada, in this respect, is one of the leaders in the world, designating the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization under criminal law, which is a breakthrough. I think it is very, very important signal and at a good time. Perhaps should have started many years before, when it was already presented by, I think, the current opposition. But what is important to note is that Iran must be pressured to stop its operation, to stop its attack on Israel, because that's a precursor for many more attacks that will eventually come out from it in the future. Iran has an agenda, a very broad and long agenda. The elimination of the state of Israel will also come at the cost of other countries in the region. They aim for Jordan, they aim for other countries. So they are very dangerous and very lethal. They're very serious, the Iranian regime, in using whatever means they have to erase Israel off the map and then to continue with their revolution. And so we speak to the people of Iran and tell them, we are with you, we are standing with you. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu came out with a very clear message on that, but it's the Iranian regime that is so dangerous and needs to be addressed.
Let me talk about the content of addressing that and ask you about that in particular, because the IDF said today, quote, there will be consequences. You, in your initial video that you posted, called it very specifically a war. I know you're not going to reveal, obviously, what the exact response is, but what can you tell about the nature of that response? What should we know about how Israel plans to respond to this?
What we need to do, not just Israel, it's not just Israel's war, but the international community, what we must do is to make sure that the leaders of Iran, the Iranian regime, understands that it is not worth their while not to develop their nuclear program, their terrorist program, their missile program, the threat that they actually present to global security. That must be stopped. So there are numerous ways to do that, and it's, I think, futile to discuss what is the best there. It needs to be a concise, concentrated, focused message to the Iranian regime.
I'll pick up on the point you made, particularly around their nuclear capacity, and ask you very bluntly if Israel has ruled out striking their nuclear facilities, in particular Natanz.
I'm not going to comment on that.
There is, I guess, maybe I'll ask it a different way. I know you're not going to give me the specifics. Are you aware of essentially what that might end up contributing to prompting?
I would just say this. Iran has developed a nuclear program not because, as they have lied for many years, because they need nuclear energy for civilian use. They need the nuclear program so they'll have a nuclear device, so they will have a new power position like North Korea in Asia and East Asia. They would like to have one in West Asia, and to become a sort of a powerhouse that tries to align the region and beyond according to their order. That cannot take place. And so it's not just an issue for Israel. The dilemma that Iran poses is for the rest of the world, not just for us, it's for the entire Western world, for Western liberal democratic civilization as we know it. That's the threat. So the nuclear issue is part and parcel of that. But it's not the only one.
Sure. And I think the reason I'm asking is because primarily we were speaking about what happened in April and how when Israel did counter to the attack that Iran launched, it was near nuclear facilities, but not directly aimed at them. In essence, analysts that I read said to send a message, we are capable of doing so. So I think I was just trying to ascertain from you how much more severe Israel views this attack, and if that is off the table or still on the table.
Well, I can't speak about that, but you can imagine that we have a range of targets that we can go after in Iran, and all of that is on the table. So,
and finally, I just wanted to conclude by asking you about Lebanon in particular. The events, obviously, there's been an evolution of events over the last week, but last Wednesday, it appeared from the way in which U.S. officials were talking into Thursday that there was some sort of buy-in from Israel and actually participation in writing the parameters of a 21-day ceasefire. Is that 100% off the table, given the events of the weekend and today?
With our goal in vis-a-vis Lebanon, as the government has stated, is to make sure that the inhabitants of the northern part of Israel can return safely to their homes. That's the government has stated that goal. It's about 60,000 people whose homes were destroyed. Some relatives, 48 people were killed, 12 children playing soccer in Majid al-Shams. We want to have a perimeter, a strip of land, as agreed by the United Nations Security Council many years ago already, that will be free of militias and Hezbollah and weapons and all of that. This is our goal. To attain that in an effective way, a few things must happen. The Lebanese government, the Lebanese military should be able to take control and responsibility for the region. The United Nations demilitarization force, the peacekeeping forces, should be able to ascertain that the resolution is fully implemented. At the moment, we don't see that happening. We don't see any means, we don't see any pressure on Hezbollah leaving that area. So when we're talking about a ceasefire, we know that Hezbollah, out of their own will, joined the war in October the 8th and started shooting into Israel. Hezbollah is not a member of the United Nations. Hezbollah, there's no policeman that will stop Hezbollah. So an agreement has to have very clear leverage and terms that will make clear that it will not be broken. And we don't see that happening with Hezbollah. We see actually the contrary. We see that they are continuing to shoot. They actually shot the other day a renewed salvo into Israel. So
was the U.S. mistaken in its impression then? Because it was very directly conveyed, even the day after, that they felt that Prime Minister Netanyahu in particular was a part of arriving at that solution or arriving at that conclusion. Is that misplaced?
I'm not sure. I wasn't part of those discussions, but I can tell you that we do believe that there is only one solution. There's a diplomatic solution between us and Lebanon. We're not at war with Lebanon. We wish we didn't have to strike Hezbollah, weapon depots, and their militia and their terrorists, but we have to because they continue to shoot into Israel. And so at the moment, as much as we would like to have a diplomatic solution, we see no players on the other side that can verify, that can really make this agreement happen. And as long as that doesn't happen, and we don't have that in place, and we see Hezbollah continue to shoot into Israel and pose a threat to Israeli population, we have to take action, and this is what we are doing right now.
Ambassador, I'll leave it on that note. Thank you very much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.